The Salem Witch Trials. What if I told you that one lie spoken by a frightened child led to the execution of innocent people and forever changed American history? The Salem Witch Trials. Imagine waking up in a quiet village where your neighbors suddenly believe the devil has arrived, not because they saw him, but because someone claimed they felt his invisible touch. Imagine knowing that a single accusation could send you to prison, strip away everything you owned, and lead you to a public execution, even if there was not a single piece of physical evidence against you. This is not a legend. It is not a horror novel. It really happened. Welcome to Salem, Massachusetts, in the bitter winter of 1692, where fear became more powerful than truth. Neighbors turned against neighbors, and one of the darkest chapters in American history unfolded before the eyes of an entire colony. But here's the strangest part. Nearly 350 years later, historians are still arguing about what truly happened. Was it mass hysteria? Poisoned food? Religious extremism? Political revenge? Or was there an even darker secret buried beneath the streets of Salem that no one dared to speak aloud? To understand the mystery, we have to travel back to a world almost impossible to imagine. A world where people genuinely believed that Satan walked among them. A world where every storm, every illness, every failed harvest, and every unexplained death could be blamed on witches. This is the true story of the Salem Witch Trials. And the deeper we go, the more unbelievable it becomes. In 1692, Salem Village was nothing like the bustling tourist destination people know today. It was a small Puritan farming community on the edge of the Massachusetts Bay Colony, surrounded by thick forests that seemed endless. Winters were harsh, food was often scarce, and Native American raids on nearby settlements kept families living in constant fear. Life revolved around one thing above all else: religion. The Puritans believed they had been chosen by God to build a perfect Christian society. Every action, every word, every thought was expected to honor him. Their ministers preached terrifying sermons about eternal damnation. Children grew up hearing vivid descriptions of hell. They believed angels watched them. They believed demons tempted them. And above all, they believed the devil was constantly searching for new servants. Witches were not considered fictional characters. To the Puritans, witches were absolutely real. A witch was someone who had made a pact with Satan, exchanging their soul for supernatural powers. If witches existed anywhere, they believed, Salem could easily become their next target. Ironically, this overwhelming fear of evil would eventually create an evil of its own. At the center of Salem Village stood Reverend Samuel Parris, the community's controversial minister. Parris had not been welcomed warmly when he arrived. Many villagers questioned his leadership, argued over his salary, and resented his growing demands for money and influence. The village itself was already deeply divided. Some families supported Parris. Others wanted him removed. Old land disputes had poisoned friendships. Business rivalries created bitter enemies. Even members of the same church secretly distrusted one another. Salem was already a community filled with tension. It simply hadn't exploded yet. Living inside Reverend Parris's home were two young girls who would unknowingly ignite the fire. 9-year-old Elizabeth Parris, known as Betty, and her 11-year-old cousin, Abigail Williams. Like most Puritan children, they were expected to spend their days studying scripture, attending church, completing chores, and avoiding sinful behavior. Entertainment was considered dangerous. Games were discouraged. Stories were carefully controlled. Childhood by modern standards barely existed. Then, during the cold weeks of January 1692, everything changed. Betty suddenly began screaming without warning. She crawled beneath furniture. She threw objects across the room. She twisted her body into painful positions. Sometimes she covered her ears and cried that invisible voices were tormenting her. Other times she stared blankly into empty space, as though watching someone no one else could see. Soon Abigail displayed nearly identical symptoms. Then other girls throughout the village began acting the same way. They barked like dogs. They shrieked uncontrollably. Their bodies convulsed violently. They claimed invisible creatures pinched, scratched, and strangled them. Doctors examined the children. No illness could explain their behavior. Medical knowledge in 17th century New England was extremely limited. When physicians found no natural cause, they reached a terrifying conclusion. The girls must be victims of witchcraft. That diagnosis changed everything. Because if someone had bewitched the children, someone in Salem had willingly chosen Satan. Fear spread through the village faster than wildfire. Parents refused to let children wander alone. Church attendance increased dramatically. Every unusual event became suspicious. A sick cow, a failed crop, a nightmare, a fever. Everything suddenly looked like evidence of dark supernatural forces. But there was one enormous problem. No one knew who the witches were, until the girls began naming names. The first person accused shocked almost no one. Her name was Tituba. She was an enslaved woman living in Reverend Parris's household, originally from the Caribbean or South America. To the Puritans, her foreign background, unfamiliar customs, and stories from distant lands made her an easy target. Rumors spread quickly. People whispered that Tituba told fortune-telling stories. Some claimed she spoke of magic. Others insisted she knew secret rituals. Whether any of it was true hardly mattered anymore. Fear had already decided her guilt. Soon another woman was accused. Sarah Good. She was homeless, poor, often begging for food, and known for muttering angrily when people refused to help her. Many villagers already disliked her. When livestock later became sick or children developed fevers, people suddenly remembered seeing Sarah nearby. Coincidence became evidence. Then came the third accusation. Sarah Osborne. Unlike Sarah Good, Osborne had committed a different kind of offense. She had remarried after the death of her husband. She had challenged accepted social expectations. She had fought over inheritance rights. To many conservative Puritans, she already seemed suspicious long before the accusations began. Within days, 3 women sat under arrest. None understood why. None imagined what would come next. The authorities questioned them for hours. The courtroom overflowed with frightened spectators, desperate to witness evil exposed. Sarah Good denied every accusation. Sarah Osborne denied every accusation. Then all eyes turned toward Tituba. What happened next would transform local panic into colonial catastrophe. After repeated interrogations, and likely under enormous physical and psychological pressure, Tituba finally confessed. She admitted she had served the devil. She claimed mysterious black dogs appeared before her. She described flying creatures. She spoke of strange birds. She insisted a tall, dark figure ordered her to harm Christian souls. But then, she said something that froze the courtroom into complete silence. She declared she was not alone. According to Tituba's confession, there were many more witches hiding throughout Salem. Some wore ordinary clothes. Some attended church every Sunday. Some were respected members of the community. She even claimed to have seen a mysterious book carried by the devil containing the names of his followers, and many signatures remained unread. The room erupted into panic. If Tituba was telling the truth, Salem wasn't facing one witch. It was facing an invisible conspiracy. No one knew who could be trusted anymore. Neighbors began watching one another. Children feared their parents. Friends questioned lifelong friendships. Every whisper became dangerous. Every argument could become an accusation. And the frightened girls, now treated almost like living detectors of witchcraft, continued naming more suspects. Each new accusation created another arrest. Each arrest produced another confession or another stubborn denial. But the authorities noticed something deeply unsettling. Those who confessed often escaped immediate execution. Those who insisted they were innocent were treated as servants of the devil who refused to repent. Without realizing it, Salem had created a system that rewarded false confessions and punished the truth. The nightmare had only just begun. Because among the next people accused would be respected church members, successful farmers, elderly grandmothers, and even individuals who had spent their entire lives defending the Puritan faith. The devil, it seemed, was no longer hiding on the edges of society. According to Salem's growing panic, he was already living next door. And before the year was over, the accusations would spread far beyond anything anyone could control. The accusations refused to stop. Instead, they spread like wildfire through Salem village. Every sunrise brought another whispered rumor. Every sunset ended with another family wondering whether soldiers would knock on their door before morning. No one felt safe anymore. Not the poor, not the wealthy, not even the people who had spent their entire lives inside the church. As winter slowly gave way to spring, the number of accused men and women climbed higher than anyone could have imagined. What had begun with a handful of frightened girls was becoming a crisis that threatened the entire Massachusetts Bay Colony. People no longer asked, "Are witches real?" They asked only one question: who will be accused next? The village itself seemed transformed. Doors stayed locked. Neighbors stopped visiting one another. Ordinary conversations became dangerous because a careless word could later be repeated in court as evidence of guilt. Children who had once played together now crossed the street to avoid each other. Trust, the foundation of every community, was disappearing. Then something happened that changed the course of the trials forever. The colonial government established a special court known as the Court of Oyer and Terminer. Its purpose was simple: hear the growing number of witchcraft cases, deliver justice, restore order. Instead, it became the engine that fueled one of the greatest miscarriages of justice in American history. Among the judges was William Stoughton, a deeply religious man convinced that Satan was actively attacking New England. He believed hesitation could allow evil to spread. The court moved quickly. Too quickly. Witnesses crowded into the small courtroom, eager to tell stories of strange dreams, mysterious illnesses, and invisible attacks. The accused often stood silently before the judges, unable to understand the bizarre claims being made against them. One witness insisted that an invisible spirit had choked her during the night. Another claimed a ghostly figure appeared beside her bed. A third swore she had seen the accused transform into an animal before disappearing into darkness. There was no physical proof, no fingerprints, no weapons, no documents, only fear. And yet the court accepted testimony that today seems almost impossible to believe. It became known as spectral evidence. If someone claimed that the spirit or specter of another person had attacked them in a dream or vision, that accusation could be presented in court. The judges believed the devil could allow a witch's spirit to travel unseen, while the accused remained somewhere else entirely. To modern eyes, the idea sounds unbelievable. But in 1692, many educated people accepted it as fact. That single decision changed everything. Because now, anyone could accuse anyone, and there was almost no way to prove innocence. The courtroom became a stage where terror replaced reason. Whenever one of the accused entered, the young accusers often collapsed dramatically. They screamed. They cried. They pointed toward invisible figures. Some claimed unseen hands were squeezing their throats. Others insisted sharp needles were piercing their skin. As soon as the accused looked in their direction, the girls threw themselves onto the floor in violent convulsions. The spectators gasped. The judges watched carefully. To them, these scenes seemed like undeniable proof. To the accused, it felt like a nightmare they could not escape. One respected woman, Rebecca Nurse, could hardly believe she had been arrested. She was over 70 years old. Known throughout Salem as kind, gentle, and deeply religious, she had spent decades caring for her family and helping her neighbors. Many villagers refused to believe the charges. Surely, they thought, there must be some terrible mistake. Dozens of friends signed petitions declaring her innocence. Even members of the courtroom hesitated. When the first jury returned a verdict of not guilty, relief spread across the room. But it lasted only moments. The accusers erupted into screams. They insisted Rebecca's spirit was attacking them even as she stood before the court. The judges ordered the jury to reconsider. After further pressure and confusion, the verdict changed. Rebecca Nurse was declared guilty. The message was unmistakable. Good reputation could no longer protect anyone. Soon the accusations reached even higher. John Proctor, a successful farmer, openly criticized the trials. He questioned the honesty of the accusers. He warned that innocent lives were being destroyed. Those words made him dangerous. Before long, John Proctor himself was accused of witchcraft. His wife, Elizabeth, was arrested as well. Friends who tried to defend them suddenly found themselves under suspicion. Silence became the safest choice. Entire families began turning against one another. Some confessed simply to save their lives. Others refused to admit to crimes they had never committed. The jail cells filled rapidly. Prisoners lived in miserable conditions. Cold stone floors, little food, chains around their ankles. Disease spread easily. Families struggled to pay jail fees, and prisoners were often required to cover the cost of their own imprisonment. Even those eventually released emerged financially ruined. Outside the prison walls, executions were drawing closer. The first condemned prisoner was Bridget Bishop. Unlike many others, Bishop did not fit Salem's strict expectations. She wore colorful clothing. She owned several taverns. She argued openly. To many Puritans, she seemed rebellious long before she was accused. During her trial, witnesses claimed they had seen strange figures in her home. Others insisted invisible spirits accompanied her. No convincing physical evidence ever appeared. It did not matter. On June 10, 1692, Bridget Bishop was hanged on Gallows Hill. The crowd watched in silence. Some believed justice had been served. Others quietly wondered whether something had gone terribly wrong. But nobody dared speak too loudly, because questioning the court could make you the next suspect. The executions continued, one after another. Men, women, young, old. Some spent their final moments praying. Others forgave those who had accused them. Several proclaimed their innocence until the very end. Yet the court continued accepting spectral evidence. Each execution only seemed to strengthen the belief that witches truly surrounded Salem. Fear had become self-sustaining. Every death created fresh panic. Every panic produced new accusations. The cycle appeared impossible to stop. Still, not everyone believed the trials were delivering justice. Quietly behind closed doors, ministers, merchants, and ordinary citizens began asking dangerous questions. What if innocent people were dying? What if the devil was not controlling Salem at all? What if fear itself had become the colony's greatest enemy? Those questions were growing louder. And before long, one shocking event would force even the colony's most powerful leaders to confront a horrifying possibility. The witch hunt had escaped everyone's control. By the late summer of 1692, Salem had become almost unrecognizable. The executions continued. The jails overflowed. Families were torn apart. And yet, despite months of arrests, interrogations, and hangings, the fear refused to disappear. If anything, it grew even stronger. People began asking themselves a terrifying question. If so many witches had already been captured, why were new accusations appearing almost every day? The answer was simple. Fear no longer needed evidence. It only needed another victim. Then the trials took an even darker turn. The accusations reached people no one had imagined could ever be suspected. Respected ministers, successful merchants, military officers, even relatives of powerful government officials. The panic had escaped every boundary. No social status offered protection anymore. One of the most shocking cases involved Giles Corey. He was an elderly farmer in his 80s. Stubborn, independent, known throughout Salem for speaking his mind. When his wife Martha Corey was accused of witchcraft, Giles openly criticized the proceedings. Instead of listening to his concerns, the court accused him too. But Giles Corey refused to cooperate. When ordered to enter a plea of guilty or not guilty, he remained completely silent. He understood something few others did. If he entered a plea, the court would seize his property after conviction, leaving his family with nothing. By refusing to answer, he prevented the legal process from moving forward. The judges were furious. According to English law at the time, there was a punishment for prisoners who refused to plead. It was called peine forte et dure. The punishment was almost unimaginable. Giles was laid on the ground. A wooden board was placed across his chest. Heavy stones were stacked on top. Again and again, officials demanded a plea. Each time they asked, Giles reportedly answered with only 2 words. More weight. Hour after hour, more stones were added. His ribs cracked. His breathing became weaker. Yet he refused to surrender. After nearly 2 days of unimaginable suffering, Giles Corey died beneath the crushing weight. He became the only person in American history to be pressed to death during a criminal proceeding. His sacrifice protected his family's property, but it also shocked many who witnessed it. People began wondering whether justice had crossed a terrible line. Then another unexpected change began. Some of the colony's most respected ministers started expressing doubts. Among them was Increase Mather, one of the most influential religious leaders in New England. He issued a warning that would echo through history. It were better that 10 suspected witches should escape than that one innocent person should be condemned. For months, few had dared challenge the court. Now respected voices were finally speaking. Quiet criticism became public concern. Public concern became political pressure. Even Governor William Phips began questioning what was happening. His own wife, Lady Mary Phips, had reportedly been mentioned during the growing wave of accusations. If the governor's family could be suspected, no one was beyond reach. Suddenly, the crisis became impossible to ignore. In October 1692, Governor Phipps acted. He dissolved the court of Oyer and Terminer. The controversial court that had accepted spectral evidence was gone. A new court replaced it. This time, the rules were different. Spectral evidence would no longer carry the same weight. Without those extraordinary accusations, many of the remaining cases quickly collapsed. Prisoners began walking free, one after another. Some returned home to find their farms abandoned. Others discovered their property had been confiscated. Many had lost husbands, wives, children, parents. Some returned to homes that no longer existed. The physical trials had ended, but the emotional wounds would last for generations. By the time the hysteria finally subsided, more than 200 people had been accused of witchcraft. Around 30 were found guilty. 19 innocent people were hanged. 5 others died inside overcrowded prisons. And Giles Corey had been crushed beneath stones, not because anyone proved they practiced witchcraft, but because fear had replaced justice. In the years that followed, something remarkable happened. Many of those involved publicly admitted they had been wrong. Several jurors signed formal statements expressing deep regret. Judge Samuel Sewall stood before his congregation, confessing his guilt and asking God for forgiveness. Families petitioned the government to clear the names of their loved ones. Gradually, compensation was paid to surviving relatives. One by one, convictions were reversed. But no apology could restore the lives that had been taken. Historians have spent centuries trying to explain what truly caused the Salem Witch Trials. Some point to mass psychological hysteria. Others argue that long-standing family feuds erupted into deadly accusations. Economic rivalries, political instability, religious extremism, the trauma of frontier wars. Even medical theories have been proposed, including the possibility that contaminated rye infected with ergot fungus may have caused hallucinations in some individuals. Yet no single explanation answers every question. Perhaps that is why Salem continues to fascinate the world, because it reminds us that history's greatest tragedies are not always caused by monsters. Sometimes, they are created by ordinary people who become convinced they are doing the right thing. Today, Salem tells a very different story. Visitors walk peacefully through streets once filled with terror. Museums preserve the evidence. Memorials honor the innocent victims. The names once spoken as accusations are now remembered with respect. Rebecca Nurse, John Proctor, Elizabeth Proctor, Martha Corey, Bridget Bishop, Giles Corey, and many others whose lives were forever changed by fear. Their stories have become a warning passed from one generation to the next. A warning about the danger of blind belief, about the consequences of abandoning evidence, about what happens when panic replaces reason. The Salem Witch Trials did not become famous because witches were found. They became famous because innocent people were condemned. That is the real mystery. Not whether witches existed, but how an entire community became convinced they did. Nearly 3.5 centuries have passed. The gallows are gone. The courtroom has fallen silent. The judges, the accusers, and the accused have long since become part of history. Yet the lesson remains as powerful today as it was in 1692. Whenever fear is allowed to silence truth, whenever rumors become stronger than facts, whenever suspicion is treated as proof, History has a way of repeating itself. And perhaps that is the most chilling revelation of all. The greatest danger in Salem was never supernatural. It was human. And that is why the story of the Salem Witch Trials still refuses to die.